Welcome, everybody, to the BattleWorld podcast here on LRM's Genreverse podcast network. This is where we get to talk about war movies. If you don't get what BattleWorld is, maybe this is your first time at our site, but it's a throwback to Marvel Comics Secret Wars, where they brought all the characters together and we got, well, a Marvel war movie. And well, guys,
just to kind of link it into our bread and butter, which
exactly.
is, geek
and
stuff.
Not to mention, we might actually get a Secret Wars movie in the future. Would that count as a war movie to do here? I don't know.
I don't think so. No.
So it's a pretty cool little thing. We did our first episode last month, not celebrating, but in honor of the Operation Overlord D-Day invasions, and we covered Saving Private Ryan. And with the 4th of July weekend coming up, of course, we had to remain here in the United States of America, much to Cam's, what's the word? Chagrin, I think it is?
Chagrin.
There you go. But we had a kind of a choice. Could we go with something Independence Day themed or something Gettysburg themed? And guess what we did? Well, you can see the thumbnail, so you clicked on Gettysburg. So let me set this first off. We have myself, Kyle Malone, Mike Shockey, as usual, one of the cohorts over at the Cantina with us, and site admin here at LRMonline.com. Our other co-host and other cohort from the Cantina, my original co-host over there, Cam Clark, senior editor and writer for the website, and then a special guest, history teacher and a published and still writing historian and trying to get his doctorate, my father, Tony Malone. So welcome, Dad, to your very first podcast ever, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep, thank you.
Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Just enjoying this little bit of heat that we have going on here. But yeah, besides that, everything's going great.
And Cam, bud, how are things treating you across the pond?
Yeah, even we've got a little bit of heat for Scotland at the moment. It's been nice the last couple of days. So yeah, just it's night time now, obviously here, but yeah, it's been good.
This is kind of cool. This movie is something that I grew up watching with my dad. One of my earliest film memories, I think I've said this, is Hamburger Hill. Like, just look, he's not I can't even say how tall I was at 4 or 5 years old, and I can remember the VHS cassette sets of not sets but like the black boxes we had all Siege at Firebase, Glory, Bridge Too Far, Platoon, Patton, Waterloo.
And I read you books of Napoleon to go to sleep by.
Yeah, absolutely, which I actually have that book for my son as well. And Gettysburg was pretty special because it was one of the first movies that I was a little bit older and could have a little bit more grasp on it, I guess you could say, as far as seeing it for the first time. And my father is just a huge Civil War buff, can walk the entire battlefields out here in Virginia and point at each tree that Lee or Jackson or Longstreet pissed behind. And he's done it once too on a trip a few years ago. Literally, there's little flags out there for tree pissing. And yeah, Gettysburg is a really big deal, and we got a cool split here. My father's got his, credentials. Mike is a history teacher. Cam is a history buff. But the cool thing is, Cam's Scottish, doesn't know too much about the Civil War, and actually got to watch this movie for the first time ever.
We never got taught sort of Civil War at school. So I suppose my experience of the Civil War is just watching documentaries and stuff, and just kind of self-interest that, if there was a documentary in the telly, I think I watched one that was, I can't remember what it was called. It was like several episodes long, and it just kind of walked you through the whole kind of thing. So, so I was aware of, the significance of Gettysburg, but I had never seen the film before. No, didn't even know it existed. There you go.
Wow. let me go ahead and start with Tony. Dad, what did you when this movie first came out? I know you got to see it in theaters with a former friend before you and I saw it together. What was it? What was it like seeing this movie? Because it's different than a lot of war movies out there, where this really tries to blend almost documentary meets Hollywood.
Well, it's based on a historical novel. I mean, that's what you got to call The Killer Angels, historical novel, but it's a very well written historical novel. I guess what appeals to me about the movie is that they actually used reenactors as all the extras, and in a lot of cases as the experts for the movie. And I don't know how many people's ever talked to these reenactors, but they really take their stuff seriously. I mean, they go all out to try to make it as accurate as can be. So I don't trust Hollywood for history as far as I could throw somebody. I do trust the reenactors, just like I trust veterans when they tell me, this war movie, like Saving Private Ryan, veterans that had hit the beach said, hey, this was spot on. So I trusted being spot on. I had some doubts about some of the actors they chose. At first, Martin Sheen as Robert E. Lee kind of worried me. Martin Sheen's a very liberal-minded guy. Civil War is not exactly things that left of center people really like to think and talk about, at least in any positive way. But while he's not the best looking Lee, I thought he did an excellent job of Lee's mannerisms. I've probably got at least 8 to 9 biographies on Lee, anywhere from making Lee the god of war to Lee being the worst general that ever walked the face of the earth.
Who wrote that one?
So, well, there are criticisms.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And to be a good historian, you have to look at the historiography of all of it, whether it's positive or negative lights.
Yeah.
So, but overall, I thought this was a very well done movie, very historically accurate, at least in the basics. You can't always say they said this for sure or that for sure, but they gave the flow of the movie quite well to history.
Definitely. And kind of with that, the reason why we chose this film, like I said, is the date. We're coming up on 158 years since the Battle of Gettysburg. This is going out either on the 2nd or 3rd of July here in 2021. But this battle is incredibly important to American history, to world history, when you look at what the world stage witnessed and saw in their papers as telegraph lines lit up on July 3rd and 4th and 5th, and as news spread of what happened in a little town in Pennsylvania. And when we get into this movie, I want everyone to understand that we're not going to be talking politics. Politics were a part of the war, but we're talking about an individual battle, and we're going to be talking about individual people and military related things, okay? And we're going to be talking in historical context. So if you're sensitive, if you think you're going to start scrolling through and looking for any gotcha moments, this isn't the place or time. This is all completely in the context that we just framed it. So with that, you can feel free to hit this dislike button and go fuck yourself. But for those of you that like to stay here and listen and have some fun and challenge your thoughts and get to see maybe a great movie that you hadn't considered seeing before, or even see it in a different light, this is definitely the place to be. We're going to cover in a couple of themes, like we did the Saving Private Ryan. And one of the first things is exactly what I just mentioned, historical significance. Mike, you're a history teacher, man. How have you approached this battle in your classes?
So teaching American history, like when we go over Civil War, we'll talk about the the battles, whether it's in Antietam, Vicksburg, Fredericksburg. So Gettysburg is the turning point of the war. The onset of the war, we see a lot of Confederate victories because of the two different strategies that are put in place. You have the Union battle plan of the Anaconda plan, where it's just like an anaconda snake, basically surrounding the entire Confederacy, and with its strength squeezing down on the Confederate, cut off all supplies and any type of resources that would help them last. Where in the Confederacy, defense, and where we see a lot of the early victories for the Confederacy is basically they got to pick and choose the battles where they wanted to be in the southern states. And so when we see Gettysburg, it's a different strategy, because I explained to my students that at this point in time, the Confederacy run supplies. The Confederacy, it realizes that Grant's coming from the west with his troops, and that the significance of blockading the Atlantic Ocean and all the different parts of the Anaconda plan are working just in a slow manner. So if Lee and the Confederate soldiers can swing around and basically surround Washington, D.C., then it's the old game of chess. When you capture the capital, you basically have pretty close to checkmate there. And that was kind of if the Union soldiers don't hold Lee and the Confederate soldiers from getting to Washington, D.C., we might have a different story there. So, that's where when I teach, if that doesn't go the Union's way, we might have, we definitely will have a different, alternate history, going forward from that moment important. So, the focus is how, that in that moment, in that time period. And then you have Abraham Lincoln, who goes to Gettysburg. This is, his time to see the repercussions of the battle, and then giving the Gettysburg Address. So it's all tied in to this big climactic theme that this war was something just a casual war. This is not just a fight over land. This was not, and they kind of mention, and you hear the themes brought out in a lot throughout this movie, is that this is not just a regular war. These are men fighting against family, fighting against friends, that, and that this is something different that, very rarely is ever seen in history. So, it's significant importance in our history as a country. And I try to convey that as much as possible to my students to understand that it wasn't just a regular battle. It just wasn't something that, hey, Union won, and then they started going on a run and won the war after that.
Very, very cool. My father also teaches history as well. In addition to like I said, the military history degrees that he has. Dad, is that approach pretty much similar to what you guys do in school? And what do you do with Civil War era in your military history class?
Well, when I taught U.S. history, because that's been a couple years, because now I'm doing government. Being in high school, we take from the Reconstruction on, so I don't get chance to cover that in the regular U.S. history. But military history, it's just not teaching about battles and what I call the beans and bullets, but we cover all kinds of aspects. But when we talk about Gettysburg, some of the things that we key in on is, one, it's a turning point because it's the last time that Lee will invade the North.
Right.
Okay? And so that's seen as a turning point there. And it's from that point on that Lee is always kept on the defense, at least strategically defense. Okay. Lee differed from a lot of other generals at the time, and including Jefferson C. Davis, the president, and realizing that you can't defend this huge country called the Confederate States of America. They just don't have the resources, men, equipment, whatever. And that time was against them. They were going to always grow weaker. So he always sought to find that one battle, that one, it's like going back to Napoleon's day. Napoleon was always looking for that one knockout battle. If you look at Napoleonics, most of his campaigns ended, including the wars, because they had so many different what they call the coalitions against him,
Right.
after one major battle, and that's what Lee was looking for. And so Gettysburg was the one time that he had that chance, both strategically, tactically. He had an army, the largest he had ever commanded since the early days of the 7 Days battles, and it was pretty much a veteran army.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was kind of going Lee's way at that point. And so that's another reason you want to see it as this very crucial moment in history, this one last great chance where everything's on Lee's side.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, you have what we call the fog of war, which means anything can happen, and Lee loses. Yeah. So it's why it's the turning point. He'll never have the resources or everything going his way after that point.
So Cam, this is really kind of, I mean, like you said, you'd seen a lot of or not maybe a lot, but you'd seen some documentaries and stuff, but this is kind of your first look at some of the more personal stories and like soldiering of the Civil War era.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, like the names, other than Grant and Lee, I wasn't familiar with any of the names. Like that you guys are rhyming off, and obviously these people are famous to but the character Jeff Daniels plays the character, Tom Berenger plays. These are just new people to me. The only one that I could key in on from that movie is Lee, because obviously General Lee has been heard about for it's just, you never not hear about that name in history. So so it was quite a completely new experience for me.
What did you think about the way this film showed a major historical moment in U.S. history to where we're really without? Was it difficult for you to get into it, Cam? Because I'm not an American.
No, because I just enjoy sort of history. So I think I'd say to you that like if you split it almost into 3 days, right? That I kind of enjoyed the first day the most, which might be unpopular because that's not really, there's only one sort of battle at that point, and it's sort of later on, it's more all the setup. But that's the kind of part that interested me more, how they all got into this sort of situation in the first place, and kind of getting introduced to some of the characters that, characters and real life people that, I didn't really know anything about at all.
Very cool. So, well, let's go ahead and get into, for lack of a better phrase, since we're talking a movie here, the characters, but we're talking about the historical figures, and the movie does look for a few key characters to follow. And if you're into the history and you know your history, of course you're going to follow Lee, you're going to follow Meade, who takes command right as the battle is kind of coming around. You expect to hear things about Buford and things like that, but we get to meet some other characters. We get to spend some time with Ewell. We get to spend some time with Armistead and Hooker. I appreciate the extra dialogue from Reynolds when he first rides into town and meets with Buford on the first day. You get to meet these characters that played some big parts in this even bigger battle, and really look at them in a historical aspect and a human aspect. It shows the successes and the failures. It's really, really hard, especially today, to approach this movie, this war, in the same way that they did, because I don't think that there was at any time in this film where they were trying to portray anyone in any way other than historical. Yeah, you embellish on things that are said, lines and stuff like that, but I wanted asked my dad, who did you find kind of like to be the most historically accurate in this film, Dad?
Oh, well, it's kind of a tie for three. I'll pick on two Confederates. Of course, I thought again that Martin Sheen did a great job with Lee and his mannerisms and stuff. In some cases, that was one of the downfalls of Lee, is the way he commanded things. I also liked the portrayal of Armistead. He was always an interesting character that history don't cover a great deal. And of course, for the Union, of course they zero in on him, and he's probably got more time as on the Union side for filming than anybody else is Chamberlain. He's a very interesting character who's going to play a significant role from that point all the way to the final surrender at Appomattox. And
yes,
if you read about Chamberlain, they did a pretty good job with him. I mean, I thought Jeff Daniels did an excellent job of portraying him. So they would be the three that I would zero in as being, ones that they really captured the essence historically of these characters.
That's really, really cool to hear about Armistead, because you're right. There's not a lot written about him. Shockey, with this movie and just your interest when it came out, you sit in age between Cam and I, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then so you were a little bit older than me. What kind of led you to really enjoy this film and be able to get into it?
So let's see. When the movie came out, it was in
93,
it was like 93. Okay. So
93,
I was living. Yeah. So I was living in just north of Atlanta, Georgia during that period when that came out. And so, of course, Ted Turner, who kind of orchestrated the film to go from, it was originally supposed to be a made for TV film. And then when production started and everything, he kind of orchestrated it to go straight to theaters to get, an actual theatrical release on it. And so, of course, Ted Turner headquarters, TNT and CNN being in Atlanta, Georgia, it was a big to do. So when the movie came out, the newspapers, the news, everything, made a big ordeal about it. And so my dad, who, is into, war movies and history and stuff, decided, to take me on there to the film, not knowing 4 hours long. He thought it was going to be just a regular 2-hour flick. And then all of a sudden, we're sitting in there for a very, very, I mean, it showed, what I like about this film, right, is that it shows the humanity of war. Okay, a lot of the war movies during that time period, you're talking about Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger's, the give me a rocket and I'm going to blow something up, and it was all about explosions at that time period. And so this was drastically different. A lot of dialogue, a lot of action that I was thinking was going to happen, and it's more talking about the human side of and getting to know these individuals and their and really the brotherhood that they had going into this war and during this war. And I think the greatest line, I don't know why it stuck with me, but I remember it from the from watching it as a kid, and then and when I rewatched it again before this, was Sam Elliott's character. With Buford on the first day, his thing was, if I could remember correctly, it was that today has already been decided. We're fighting for tomorrow. And basically on day one, Buford's holding, the line to try to prevent the Confederates from going into Gettysburg. And so every time I heard that line, I was like, that's a great point. Cause you look back at, previous, wars, and you look at, it's all about the today has already been decided. Now what you're doing is you're basically preparing for, and you're orchestrating for tomorrow's battle and stuff. So, and that's what kind of, you have to watch this film like that. You're not watching when the day one of July 1st for the immediate victory. You're seeing everything being set up for the next day, and then everything for the next day, which July 2nd, Robert E. Lee's putting everything together, and then he's saying, all right, on July 3rd we're making our big attack. And so everything was already put in place. It was today was already in Longstreet at the end saying this is not going to work. Everything's already set up. It's to our disadvantage. And so that's kind of what, when I heard that line in the film, you know, as a kid, it kind of opened my eyes to it, and kind of it made me see, you know, war in a different light after that.
Nice. Cam, was there a particular general or officer character that you latched onto that really helped you into the story parts of this film?
I mean, it's probably better to look at them sort of from my point of view, just the performances I enjoyed. So I enjoyed sort of Jeff Daniels. I enjoyed Martin Sheen. Tom Berenger I thought was very good. And Sam Elliott, although he's only kind of really at the start of it, I thought, yeah, I just like Sam Elliott in anything, to be honest. You know, he's just got that way about him. And I just probably kind of like on what Mike's saying there, I liked a lot of his lines. You know what I mean? I did like that as well, the way he described everything that was going to happen and how it wasn't going to work, but they had to do it anyway. You know what I mean? Was just, you know, that was pretty cool. So again, that's probably why I say, like, the sort of 3 days here, that I just felt like I enjoyed the first part of it the most. So yeah, those are the kind of 3 that probably would have stood out to me. But again, not knowing the historical characters too well and whether they match up at all, you know, I didn't know. But you know, I just enjoyed the performances.
So the performances are engaging, and that's awesome to hear. You know, this is an older movie, so your setups aren't, you know, high as they are these days. It wasn't a Spielberg film. Jesus, can't speak. It's like I got injured in a.
No, it doesn't feel like a. I'm not sure how great it is as a film, as a piece of entertainment, because it is obviously very long and you know it's not got that kind of Hollywood
shine
pizzazz about it. But that's the point of it, of course. Do you know what I mean? It's that it's supposed to, as you know, as Tony said, you know, they used a lot of reenactors and people like that to try and get more of the kind of accuracy right, rather than actors and explosives and guts flying everywhere and stuff like that. But kind of that's what I expected, to kind of see the real horror of it. And I think, you know, one of you made a good point that what they kind of focused on instead was the kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? That it wasn't like a normal war in terms of like the opposing sides. Because usually, right, you know, when you have a war, there's this almost kind of, and I'm not going to use any of the terms, but you know, every sort of army has negative terms for the bad side, the bad side in their mind, because that's the focus that you go into. You know, I mean, you have to, you know, being a soldier, I've never done it like you guys, but you know, I know people that are in that, have been in that sort of environment, and you know, that's just the way you've got to get your thinking into. And this war wasn't really like that. You know, there was a hell of a lot of respect, you know, on both sides, and you know, you especially see that obviously as Armistead and what's the other guy's name, Hancock. You know, you don't see so much of Hancock, do you? Really, in the movie, it's more for sort of Armistead's side of things. Yeah, so you know, it is strange. I remember my first ever exposure to the Civil War was as a kid. And you remember that old program, North and South, that used to be on? I mean, I don't know if your dad will certainly remember this. It was Patrick Swayze, and I can't remember who else it was. And, you know, I remember them having these kind of battles where, to begin with in the war, there was like women and children kind of watching it and stuff like that. And that's what kind of sticks in my head, that it was a strange thing. I could never understand why these people who really liked each other were having to fight against each other, because of course at that age I didn't fully understand it. And that's what this movie kind of, I think, does well, and why it's a little bit different from what maybe I was expecting and what you would expect to see in most war films.
Armistead's been brought up quite a bit, and Tony, why don't you kind of explain, that whole brother versus brother, friend versus friend relationship? How far back did Armistead and Hancock go, and other relationships that were like that?
Well, a lot of it, and not all officers on both sides were West Pointers, but
Right.
many were West Pointers, and many served together in the Mexican-American War.
And they served as what branch, Dad? What branch were
Well,
they?
a lot of them were infantry. There were
A lot
some
of them
cavalry,
were
and of course,
what? Engineers?
Lee was an engineer. Yes. In fact,
Anyways.
Lee graduated second highest in his West Point class, and to this day still earns the one thing that no one's ever been able to do. He spent all 4 years without one demerit.
Damn.
So they served together down in Mexico. In fact, Longstreet, one of his best friends in the old army, as they used to say it back then, was Grant. And so Armistead, Reynolds, and Hancock were very close. And so, being a Southerner, and people again have to realize that soldiers do not fight for the same reasons their country sent them to war.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the time it's all done, most of the time the soldiers are serving because of the man to their left or right, or and that's part of the brotherhood. Well, this
100%.
brotherhood has existed since West Point, and so the thought of fighting each other, well, it tugged at their souls, but you went where you felt your honor went. You got to realize that during this time frame in the United States history, we were United States of America in name only. If you asked somebody back then, where you from, they didn't say, well, I'm from the United States. They said, no, I'm a Virginian. I'm a Tennessean, So that's why they fought. But that never really negated that brotherhood they felt. So it went back quite a few years. You're talking 10, 15, whatever amount of years it might have been, how far back they served from West Point or under the Mexican-American War. And Hancock and Armistead, of course, Reynolds would die at the battle. And so will Armistead, too, at the height of the battle, at the height of Pickett's charge. So it's another reason I think I kind of gravitate a little bit to Armistead in that story. It's kind of a sad story if you think about it. These two guys, they're like brothers, and only people that served in combat can understand that sometimes brothers go beyond blood, your fellow combat vets. And so it's kind of like I said, a heart-wrenching story, of how it ends up. Two of them die, one's left alive.
Yeah.
So
really, really rough. And I've contemplated what picture I might have on this podcast, because I did get to go visit the battlefield as an adult before my health took a turn. And you want to talk about sobering for anyone is got to be that place. My father had dragged my family to countless battlefields, many of which we fully enjoyed wholeheartedly, from Kennesaw Mountain and places in Georgia,
Chattanooga.
all of that, little ones wherever we live nearby, the Fort Donaldson and things. But Gettysburg is like an American battlefield mecca. If there's one in our country, that's it. When you go look for World War II sites, people think Normandy, they think Berlin, they might think, the UK for, of course, the Battle of Britain.
I mean, there's not much to see in Britain, though, because, in those days, everything was just bombed to hell. So,
exactly.
Half the place that exists now just wasn't there back then. So there's not a lot to really see other than monuments and statues and stuff, but not actually like the pictures you showed me where,
Right.
you know, you're literally saying, like, this is the hill that they fought on here. And, you know, we don't, I mean, and especially from someone in Scotland, if you go back far enough with our battles, I mean, you could, for example, our most famous battle was probably Bannockburn. And you can go to roughly where that happened, but there's nothing it's just a field, you know, and nobody can really tell you exactly, you know, everything that happened because there just wasn't enough historical records back then.
I'll tell you one for the UK, though. I've not got to see it. My mom made a trip over to Scotland and England and Scotland and all that. But one that I think you could put to some sort of the reverence of Gettysburg, at least in that area feeling, that would have been Culloden, the last rising of the clans.
Yeah.
Just for the sheer amount, while the bloodshed is not the same numbers because the armies didn't shed the same number, but the casualty rates, at least on the Scots side, was something. So, yeah, but Gettysburg does take a hold, even though it's not the largest of our Civil War sites. And some say it's not the best preserved. It's definitely one that gets the most recognition.
Yeah. You been there, Mike?
I've not been to Gettysburg. I've been to, my parents live basically 5 miles down the road from Kennesaw. So I've been there 100 times. And it's basically now just a place for people to go on long walks and stuff. Yeah, hikes with their family and, you know, picnics and stuff. I've been to Shiloh, Chattanooga.
Shiloh's great.
Yeah, and a couple of others from school doing, you know, the yearly field trips and stuff, you know, to different battlefields.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Atlanta's just been covered over by city. So, you know.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's really not, what is it? Kennesaw's pretty much it, you know, for if you want anything close to that.
Yeah. It's stunning, and I think I might share some of my photos. If you are watching us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, and share us with some friends and family. If you're listening, I'm sure I'm going to share at least a few photos. So go watch on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, but not before you don't hit that follow button on your favorite app. Real quick, guys, we got to take a word from our sponsors before we carry on. So take it away, whoever's reading today's ad.
Grow Generation, where the pros go to grow. For all of your cultivation needs, Grow Generation has the right products, service and staff to make your grow successful. Go to www.growgeneration.com, where the pros go to grow.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate the sponsorship. Make sure if you are looking to for grow supplies and you use Grow Generation that you tell them who sent you there. lrmonline.com. One of the other things I latched onto as a youngster was the Chamberlain arc, and so much so that I think that was the first war biography I ever read, The Heart of a Lion, Soul of a Woman, on Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. And everything about the Jeff Daniels portrayal is great. The storyline that they use to set up, you know, certain, like, you know, political aspects and some of the aspirations of men through conversations with Sergeant Kilrain and his own brother, Thomas Chamberlain. I always kind of, especially after having served myself, really continued to relate to that thread of it. And it's one of those things that you hear it's cliche, you can't understand it unless you've lived it, but it's absolutely right. I'll say 100% I disagreed with Iraq and the way it was done, especially is like, well, fuck, if we're gonna go, let's do it right, and we didn't, you know. So I served there while disagreeing with being there, but I grieve the losses from that. You know what I'm saying? And this movie really did a great job of showing that side. We always look for accuracy in modern military films as what my father would know as like how well they had done their mount training, their movement over urban terrain. You know, are they breaking down rooms right? Are they clearing properly? Are they pieing their corners? You know, yeah, I could tear stuff like that apart all day and have fun with it. You know, and we're going to talk a little bit about the technical stuff here next, but it's really hard to do that authentic kinship, that brotherhood and sisterhood in modern days when it comes to serving. And I just got to give it to the actors that put effort into their parts. All the names we've mentioned, you know, Behringer and Sheen and Daniels and even Stephen Lang. I like him as Pickett. I really do.
Yeah, I liked him as Pickett as well. Actually,
Yeah.
you know, again, a character I didn't know, but you know, it was. I don't know if this was the real character, but he was a very much kind of, you know, in your face, larger than life sort of character, very full of himself, and you know, and not very kind of, you know, just focused on he's right and everybody's wrong kind of thing. But what I kind of loved about is like the after is seeing him after it all, you know what I mean, and just how broken, you know, it was. I thought he did a really, really good job. Just that, you know, the broken man after, you know, when he goes to tells him what to do with his division, and he's like, I don't have one, you know, they're gone.
Yeah.
You know, I thought he did a really good job of that, because it was just a complete juxtapose from the way he's been throughout the rest of the movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Pickett was that way. He was. He did meet Lee on the field, and that's exactly what all the historians I've ever read said. Generally, I have no division. You know, Stephen Lang, you mentioned you did a good job. The sequel to this is Gods and Generals, which actually takes place before. Stephen Lang's plays Jackson.
Yeah, and does
and
a really
I thought
good
he
job.
did a fantastic job there. So, but yeah, he did. He's a fine actor. I think kind of underrated.
So is that a movie?
Yeah,
that's a movie, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, what happened is the guy who wrote
Michael
Killer's
Shar,
Angels.
Michael.
Sahara.
Yeah.
His son writes two books. One before that basically takes you from the beginning of the war through up to Chancellorsville with the death of Jackson. Then his father's book, and then they do the last one, the last full measure, which they were going to make a movie on, but they pulled the funding. Ted Turner for whatever reason. And so the last movie was not made, but they did do what we call kind of like the reverse order of how Star Wars did their movies.
Yeah, exactly.
But they did that one. And while the effects are a lot less reenactors and stuff like that, and some of the computer graphics not good, the acting was well, and the historical following of the story I thought was well. So yeah, to me, it's a movie it's worth checking out.
I'll need to watch that then.
Yeah, they get a.
So it's set
Daniels.
before this one.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called Gods and Generals.
Yep.
Yeah.
So is that kind of like about how the war started, or the first battles of the war, or something?
It goes from Bull Run. You get the director's cut. It cuts up a little bit into Antietam, but mainly it concentrates on Bull Run, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville.
Yep. Yeah, it opens up where the U.S. Army is offering Lee command as he's, you know, in the United States Army, while Virginia's considering secession. Lee was offered to command the army, and he just couldn't bring himself, like he says there,
to fight Virginia,
to fight against Virginia.
So the Union wanted him in charge of their side.
He's one.
You ought to realize that when the Mexican-American War ended, Lee was on the staff of General Scott, the main American commander to Mexico City, and he proclaimed Lee the greatest American soldier ever.
Yeah.
They owe the victory to Lee. Some of his scouting and his engineer reports and stuff. So he's a very well-known man. The family Lee, you know, this Revolutionary War hero's son, Light Horse Harry Lee, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, so yeah, he was off command, but he couldn't bring himself to fight against Virginia.
Nope. And it's really great, like I said, that this movie did not set out with any agenda at all. They just present everyone as they are, and hope that the audience, and back then and most people today, manage to, you know, take, yeah, sure, there's these politics that are going on above all these guys' heads, but we're here in these guys' heads, and these guys are humans, you know.
Soldiers.
They're soldiers, and that's kind of how they approach it. And with that, there's one last part about the characters stuff that I would love to talk about, and that's Lee's mannerisms that Tony, my father, brought up, and his interactions of dressing down and hearing grievances from his soldiers. And this actually leads us into the last part, which is our accuracy, with the way he gave his orders, Dad, how he received grievances about the first day not taking the hill, when you'll, you know, sat there and just basically told, what was it, Trimble to fuck off,
more or less.
kind of go into some of this stuff, like you said, led to Lee's failure here.
Yeah, well, Lee didn't have a big staff. He had just 3 or 4 favorites. None of the staff that you would have seen during the age of Napoleon or the Prussians or anything like that. And his mannerisms were, you know, he's the ultimate Southern gentleman. So when he said, you know, hey, see if you can get those people off the hill, that doesn't leave a lot of, it leaves a lot of gray area. You know, if you told Jackson, get those people off the hill if you can, or if they use the term applicable, Jackson would have took them off the hill. That's the type of general Jackson is. But when Jackson died, he was replaced in charge of the Second Corps by Ewell, who had lost a leg. Okay, so a lot of these guys that lost legs, they were up using something called laudanum, which is opium and alcohol based. And so he never was given orders with so much leeway, with so much gray area. Jackson waited to the last moment to tell his generals, this is what I want you to do, and this is how you're going to do it. That's not Lee. Lee's like, gives a lot of leeway. He's used to Jackson. He's used to Longstreet. I wrote a paper back to public on, maybe do my dissertation on something along these lines, about the differences between what we call the direct order or content of the order and the spirit of the order. Lee relied on people understanding the spirit. Well, he had the wrong commanders at Gettysburg for this. A.P. Hill, great division commander, fought under both Jackson and Longstreet, where they basically dictated commands to him. So they didn't have that spark of initiative the way Jackson did, or even Longstreet. And so you got, again, an Army commander is ultimately responsible for victory or defeat, no matter what. That's Lee's drawback, in my opinion, is he just did not, he just did not know. He was unwilling to dress them down the way they should have been. I mean, look in the movie with Stuart. That was Stuart. That was him chewing Stuart out.
Yeah.
That was not a big butt chewing.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, you're right.
What I've had.
But to Stuart, that was a major butt chewing. So, I'd say that's an area that costly, especially at Gettysburg.
Yeah. Mike, getting into accuracy for this film, as you grew up with it, having seen it a few times, and as you get into more history, kind of take us through what it's like to see a movie that pays this much attention to a battle of this scale's accuracy.
Well, it's one of the best to show students, you know, the kind of the reality of the Civil War and the kind of of the actual battles, right? Because you can go into and look at, you know, a couple different movies, and this one takes, you know, I think we've covered it before, that this one took a lot of detail in making sure that their reenactors were portraying both sides, making sure the outfits were correct, making sure that the marching was correct. You know, you had everything pretty much lined up. And I know it's early 90s filming, so it's not like what we have today where, you know, the boom cameras are swooping in, you know, some of those, you could kind of tell they're on
the crane and
truck.
You
could kind of see the crane or the, you know, the Jeep that they're, you know, trying to drive through steadily. And it's, you know, the editing was done properly, but, you know, it shows a young generation that this was a kind of the last, you know, type of war that we see, you know, amongst brothers and stuff in this country, and the totality of it. You're marching, your orders are to march ahead and go towards, you know, your enemy, you know, the people you're supposed to go against. And you know that you're taking on fire, and you got to keep going and marching. Even if the guy next to you drops, you keep marching. And it's like, you know, that's every time we get to that part, or I show clips of it. And now in today's classes, I'll show, you know, like how many of you would stay there continuing marching into cannon fire, into, you know, muskets, you know, shooting right into you, point blank range. Of course, all of them say, nope, wouldn't do it. They'd be running the other way. So it tells you like how different a mentality it was to serve on both sides, the Union and Confederacy, that these guys, you know, were, you know, this was not for money. This was not for fame. This was for what they believed in and kept going, you know, and that's what they kept driving forward. And you got that in the messages a lot, you know, is for Virginia, you know, for our brothers, you know, here. And so I think this is one of the greatest examples of media, of films you can use to show what it was like to serve during that time period.
Absolutely. It's awesome that they got to film a lot on location now.
Mm-hmm.
For people that have not been to the town recently, there has been a lot of development, but the scale, they film in a location where they do a lot of reenactments nearby, to stand in for some of the places that are just too tourist heavy to shut down, for things like that. And they did shut down a lot of places. They had to bring in dirt and leaves and things to cover up trails and paths to film on, like Little Round Top. You know, I've stood where that, you know, the famous Day 2's most famous for the Battle of Little Round Top, both in the movie and in reality. And I've stood where the line started, where the line refused, and you know, I've been to I had a little, what was he, three at the time, toddler with me and my wife, so we couldn't walk Pickett's charge, but I stood where, you know, Pickett's division comes out, and I stood at the high water mark, and I just look at that, and all I can think about is modern combat. You know, that's how I was trained. That's how I analyze everything, to my detriment in war games against my father, who knows how to fight like this shit, because I don't. And it's just insane, Cam. The movie tries to give you scope, but this battlefield, like my dad said, it's not even the biggest, but when you're there, it feels both massive and claustrophobic at the same time, to where you're really like, yeah, cannon are that close on that hill, I'm fucked. I don't want to walk across that.
Yeah,
But
one of the lines I loved in the movie was when, you know, they're all kind of hunkered down before they kind of make the charge, and they're in the trees, and there's just cannonballs hitting, and one of the guys says, "Don't move around, because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It's either going to hit you or it's fucking not going to hit you. It doesn't. You can't find a better spot." You know what I mean? And you're like, Jesus, man, that would be horrific. And then, they're just waiting at that point, you know. and so defenseless themselves, really, at that point, because their artillery is obviously gunning them as well, but from a completely different location. So, it's that was kind of eye-opening as well. But I guess that's warfare. One thing I wanted to ask about that I didn't kind of is, do you know how they have the English guy in it, the red coat?
Yes.
That turns up. Was he really there? And that's kind of historical accurate and everything.
Fremantle wrote a good history.
Right. So he kind of recorded a lot of what happened and stuff like that. Because he kind of felt a little bit out of place, like almost to me, like he just turned up for them to explain, why they were fighting this war sometimes and stuff like that. But maybe that's what it is. So when he came into the movie, it wasn't anything he did, but he just seemed to be kind of like, so tell me what, tell me what's happening here. You know what I mean? It just kind of felt like that a little bit, and I wondered if that was something he'd kind of added in, or whether he really was there. So there you go. I get my answer.
Yeah. I would like to kind of talk a bit about day one, which I actually feel, while Cam says he really enjoys this aspect, or this part of the film, and I do too. I love, we get introduced in the film through Harrison, the spy, the scout for Longstreet, and he's a great character to follow through this to the end as well. But day one's battle with Buford's skirmishers and his broken down cav unit, while waiting on Reynolds' reinforcements, that is severely understated in this movie. Buford was not in good shape showing up, and was in horrific shape at the end of the first day. And Sam, not Neil,
Elliot.
Thank you. Sam Elliott, the biggest, American cowboy actor guy you could think of when you think of those Grizzly type things, and Big Lebowski, and Thank You for Smoking, and this
Roadhouse. Do not forget about Roadhouse.
Roadhouse. What do you think about that, Dad? And is it cool? I like how they set it up very character driven, but the understatement on the battle of day one.
Yeah, well, what he did is, you got to remember, he rides in. This is even after Confederates had been in town and back, and going back in to get a cache of shoes, so the story goes. Because as you can see in the movie, when they show Confederates walking up Cashtown Pike, a lot of them are barefoot. This is very accurate. Confederates were very under-equipped. There was no set uniforms for the Confederates, most cases. But the thing about dismounted cavalry is, people also got to realize that right off the bat, when cavalry fights dismounted, they lose 1/4 of their command, because one guy has to hold his horse and 3 other horses for the 3 other guys to go fight on foot. So you effectively take 1/4 of your force out when you fight dismounted. That's just the way it works. It's usually one guy holding 4 horses. And of course, he also, and they kind of touch on it, he has one of his other brigades covering up on the road from Harrisburg, where, General Ewell's corps is supposed to come through. So, you got to give a lot of credit for Buford's cavalry, because Buford's also firing with Sharp's rifles. Okay, they load much quicker than a muzzle loading rifle. So he's got an increased firepower compared to Heath's first brigade coming up. And so, the fact that he's able to hold the way he does is really fantastic. He saves the day for the Union until the Union gets more troops up there under Reynolds. If he had not done the battle they did, the Confederates would have occupied the high ground, would have ended the war. Hard to say, but it definitely would have changed the way things followed.
Yeah. For certain. Absolutely. I can't disagree with any of that. Mike, you got anything you would like to touch on day one, historically or movie wise?
No, I think I think your dad basically nailed it perfectly on that. How Buford does an incredible job maintaining the high ground.
Yeah.
There's one thing that they don't show, and this is a shame, but you follow the book is what they were doing.
Right.
Is the failure to take Gettysburg, or at least the Cemetery Hill, on the first day. It also falls on to some troops who at Chancellorsville was routed by the Confederates. So the 11th Corps, Howard's Corps, they were mainly of German immigrants or German descended immigrants. And they break, and they're the ones that flee through the town, and they're not pressed as well as they should have, according to a lot of historians. But that was a unique part of the story. I thought it would have made an interesting story. And the director's cut of this movie, they touch on that. They touch on the failure of taking the hill and Lee meeting with Ewell and all that. You don't see that in the regular cut of the movie. They just concentrate mainly on that one aspect of Buford and Heath's division.
Yeah.
Harry Heath.
Harry Heath.
Lee always called him by his first name, which is weird. There's no real thing about them being best buds or anything, but I've been called by my first name by some of my sergeant majors and first sergeants, and it always made me feel kind of strange than calling,
Yeah. I didn't even like my peers using my first name. It was Malone for my peers is fine.
That's what I call you.
Yeah, Cam calls
me
you
Malone.
Malone. I still respond to it, but if you were my subordinate, Sergeant Malone, or if you needed to be super formal staff sergeant or sergeant first class, depending on the year. But it's always interesting.
My sergeant major wants to call me by my first name. I was going to argue.
I wouldn't either. I don't like that type of thing, because I know peers that were first name guy. Hey, Ian, what's up, Derek? Like, no, my first name for 17 years was something I rarely heard, because even at home with my wife, it's babes, sweetie, a pet name or something like that, or hey, dumbass from my dad. Oh, that's a Red Foreman joke,
Foreman's
guys.
my hero. Lee, it was, I know you're on the first day, but even on the last day when they show Lee meeting up with Longstreet at the very end, Lee calls Longstreet Pete.
Yeah.
And it shook Longstreet up like, okay, something's major here. And of course, one of the things that they figured also that could have helped the North win, that was something that was a drawback for the South, is Lee had heart problems. Okay. Angina was a normal thing for him to have quite a bit, but he had heart problems. There was speculations that he might have had a mild heart attack sometime during this battle that threw Lee off. So who knows?
It wouldn't be that surprising considering everything that was going on, really, with it, and how poor medicine was in those days, in terms of treating these kind of things. So, whenever someone is getting an issue and they're placed in an extreme situation, it wouldn't happen in modern day, because somebody with if they were that susceptible, maybe wouldn't be in command, possibly, I don't know, but in those days, and life expectancy was so short, especially at that period of time, with so many people fighting in the war. I mean, so many young men just gone before their time.
They touch on that with that last scene. Well, not the last scene of the movie, but in the third day where he's sitting there, you almost see on his face the way Martin Sheen played, like he is having some difficulties physically, not just mentally. So it's highly possible, and calling Pete, Longstreet Pete, that kind of those are like, okay, something's wrong here.
as the movie gets into its action-y part in day 2, it really surrounds the 20th Maine, Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain's group. He's the heart of the movie. He takes you along for the emotional ride. He's got his brother as a member of his staff. They got a unique relationship. Don't call me Lawrence. I love that interaction there. The Battle for Little Round Top historically is always called a key point in the battle, as it was Lee's push and intent to do exactly as Chamberlain's told to prevent. Fold that flank, roll up behind them like a wheel, and then come down the hills on the other side and just take it out. And here you have this broken unit of less than 10% strength of what it started, and it's sitting at less than 20%. At 1,000 was it that they started, and he's down to less than 300.
Usually regiments at the beginning of the war would start around 1,000.
Yeah, so he's 20% strength, manages to convince a group of would-be deserters, would-be mutineers, so to speak, to pick up arms again, and that's.
See, I wanted to ask. I mean, how he did that, is that historical? Was that recorded, or are they just saying, there's that just them taking liberties as saying how would they have done it, because we don't know how he did it? Do we know that?
Yes. He's written about that aspect. Now, what specific words, how close the words are, that I don't know, but indeed he did have a group of the Second Maine that he did convince to pick up arms.
Yeah.
After they had intended to never do again.
Well, the thing was an argument between whether you signed 3 years or 4-year enlistments, and
who
the government had a tendency of extending enlistments whether you liked it or not once the war started. And again, it goes to show you how different parts of the country looked at things differently. They were men, so for the most part, they were probably outdoorsmen, lumberjacks, things like that. Very rural type characters, much like what the South had, not city boys for the most part.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They've been very independent.
Yeah, and it would be this interesting character of Chamberlain being in charge, as he's a professor, but it doesn't take away from the fact that he's a professor from the state of Maine, like my father's talking about, upbringing and the culture and lifestyles up there. So you've got, the brainiac of lumberjacks and outdoorsmen and campers and or not campers, but outdoorsmen and hunters and trappers and things like that. And he gets to bring this unique emotional thread to an action crescendo, if you will, for his arc in day 2 at the Battle of Little Round Top, where he thins out his line. He then uses math and angles to basically extend the flank, so to speak, as the Confederates continue to try to move further and further to their right, his left, and the big heroic charge down Little Round Top, which I can say is definitely not easy terrain. And that's one of the locations they were actually able to close off and use for filming. They brought in like the leaves and things to cover trails and roads. It's a huge deal, and I will say, unfortunately, Mike had to go everyone, so it's just Cam and Tony and myself. But I would like to ask Cam, would this kind of be in the big first action bit and set piece for this film? What did you think of this?
I mean, the historical significance of it, the characters, that's what connected with me as an actual cinematic battle to fight, there's reasons we don't make a massive amount of movies set during these wars, because they don't kind of lend themselves to that, just simply because of how rural the technology is that they're using at the time. It's that way that they've literally got to pour gunpowder into their guns and do all that before every shot, so it's like, it's a completely different kind of warfare from what we're used to. It wasn't even too long after that. It was really the Civil War created a lot of innovation, didn't it, in terms of sort of arms and warfare and everything like that. So everything really kind of picked up after that. And of course, when the next major kind of war, if you like, happened, that was obviously World War One was a completely different kettle of fish, in terms of the kind of guns that they were using, and all that sort of stuff. So that's, I think, a lot more sort of cinematic to me in terms of exciting. But then, I'm looking at it in 2 points of view: as an entertaining movie for someone who's not American and doesn't kind of know the history, and then just kind of learning about history. So for me, I enjoyed the movie for the historical aspect, but I didn't find it particularly exciting to watch the battles, if that makes sense.
It's not like a blood pumping type excitement.
No,
but
one thing I thought, I didn't particularly enjoy the score of the film either. I thought it kind of was too twee, like too, like almost like a playing a national anthem all the way through it. Like
I can kind of see that.
And that's fine if you use that, if that's a little theme that you use in certain moments, but it's going all the way through it, and I just I didn't enjoy the score at all in the movie, I have to admit. But yeah, historically, I found it really interesting.
It's kind of funny, the score, because like I said, I was serving my second tour at Fort Campbell when they brought this movie out. And from that point on, from Fort Campbell to where I was stationed down at Fort Benning as a drill sergeant and stuff, a lot of our ceremonies and stuff, they'd play the score as the openings to it. It was quite popular, at least among
I
our
could
military.
see how that would work for like some sort of ceremony or something like that, but
to hear it continuously for four hours.
That's the thing. They could have used it at some parts, that it's just almost like a very similar kind of section of it that just keeps going all the way through it, and it got a bit too much for me, I guess, at the end.
Yeah, and of course, speaking of the end, you got the big thing of day 3, Pickett's charge, that last ditch effort to take what they are hoping would be a weakened center, not understanding that you guys don't have howitzers that we got today. You don't have laser guided artillery and cannon fire back in those days. While it could be incredibly devastating, it was not incredibly accurate and reliable.
No, not at all.
Ammo.
Even the actual guns weren't particularly accurate in those days. Do you know what I mean? So and a lot of them would just blow up in people's faces as well. There was a whole element of that going on in those days with early firearms. But yeah, cannons were very much kind of, they hadn't quite worked out the whole geometry of, like nowadays, if you're in the military, and you're going to fire in something, it's, you're working that out geometry wise based on, how far that will go based on the elevation.
Back then as well, but it wasn't as much of a science.
Yeah, they can't quite
today.
Put, because they don't know exactly what's going to happen, each time. So it's judgment call a little bit
different.
Yeah,
quality.
They can put too much in, it's just not regimented the same way.
That brings up a big aspect of day 3, which is Lee's insistence that his batteries, his cannon, are going to be able to do what he orders. And Tony, Dad, was that really that big of a folly because of the technology, the unreliable ammunition? Will your canister do what it's supposed to do? Will your ball do what it's supposed to do?
Not totally. There's a couple things that people got to realize that drove Lee to the idea of the third day anyways. On the second day, and the movie don't cover this, while Little Round Top's being assaulted, and of course the Devil's Den's peach field, there was a brigade under Anderson that actually charged up and made it to that little stone wall area. And of course, if they had been properly supported, they probably could have broke the center then. So it gives Lee this idea that, yes, he can break it. Now, as for the artillery, yeah, the artillery pieces, they're not much different for the most part, especially on the Confederate side, than some of the guns used back in 1815 at Waterloo, 12-pound Napoleons and stuff. Lee's confidence was in the fact that his overall artillery commander, a guy named Pendleton, he's not that great of a guy, but Lee always favored Virginians and friendship and things like that. But under, I would say it was probably Second Corps, I think he had artillery, was a guy named Edward Porter Alexander. And he was a brilliant artilleryman and stuff. And he was one of the ones responsible for breaking up a lot of the charges of the Union at Fredericksburg. In fact, the movie even mentions, Colonel Alexander, he was a colonel at the time, he'll do like he did at Fredericksburg and break up their things.
Yeah.
Again, the accuracy's bad. The Confederates overshot. And one thing, and I think they kind of do this in the movie a little bit when they do that big panoramic shot of all the cannons firing up, is that they didn't have smokeless gunpowder. So, your own smoke and stuff, your own guns firing, plus where that's crowding vision. That's clouding the vision. And so that makes it less accurate. The cannons were not as effective as Lee had hoped. The Union had a very good artilleryman in charge of all the artillery, a guy named General Hunt, who rotated his guns in and out. And as he rotated his guns in and out, because these barrels get really hot,
really
like Cam
hot.
said, they can blow up easily sometimes. As they pulled them in and out, sometimes that gave the impression of lessening of the Union fire, which could give the Confederates the idea, hey, our guns are being quite effective. Now, to me, one of the biggest mistakes, and the movie plays it in a part, and I still to this day don't know why the Confederates didn't do this, is at the Emmitsburg Road, just prior to getting up there on the little bit of what they call Cemetery Ridge there, towards the clump of trees, a little wall, there's picket fences. Well, in that type style of fighting, marching in line stuff, that fence makes you pause to get over that fence. Why it was not cleared at night?
Yeah.
Sending what we call pioneers, or what today we call you engineers,
leading that way.
Crap down. I don't know.
Or even having a few of your guns on your opening valve. What's the V word on your opening volley of fire? Having a couple of guns aiming for those obstacles.
Obstacles is even today. As one of you, though I never had an engineer dig me an obstacle in my life.
You turned down engineers' assistance in the desert. You said ain't no engineer gonna dig my bunker.
That's one of the things that engineers are supposed to do is erect or destroy obstacles. In place, erect or destroy it. Again, it's a critical mistake. Very critical.
Absolutely. And the movie does a great job of foreshadowing, like Cam brought up Longstreet, Tom Berenger's character, where he predicts what's going to happen, very similar to what Buford does on day one, where he predicts what could happen if things aren't playing out the way he hopes they have been. Longstreet gives something more prophetic, and the movie shows the sheer terror of marching across this field. And like I said, I couldn't walk it all, but guys, it's not is it short relative to riding a bike or a gator? Yeah, sure. If you had a golf cart, but it is not something you would want to walk while being fired at with cannon overhead, exploding shot, canister shot waiting on you, freaking volley fire from long rifles. It is a beast. And go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, here's one thing that I do hold against the movie somewhat, and it's not the movie's fault, is that you talk about Longstreet, and people saying, well, Longstreet was right. It leads people to believe that Lee's tactics itself were just totally off. He should never have attacked. Always what Longstreet wanted is you are offensive strategically. In other words, you get the enemy where you want him to be, and then you wait for him to attack you, which is a sound strategy. It dates back to Napoleon and the ultimate god of war, Clausewitz and stuff. But there are some historians that, and it's got some validity to it, that Longstreet drug his heels not only on the second day, but he sort of drug him a little bit on the third day too. And that's not taken away. Again, Lee's ultimately responsible for the defeat. He's the general in charge. But the movie does give an impression that, Longstreet was 100% right. And I'm just not so sure that that's the correct way to look at it. But then again, it's a movie, and I'd encourage people to read several books from different sides along with the movie to get a better understanding of the movie. Because again, it's a well done movie. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Cameron mentioned, something that happens here to wrap up day 3, the result of Pickett's charge, which is failure, and the kind of final moment, if you will, even though you still have the whole, hey, we'll charge again, we can get them, and that moment is great, but it's Pickett's reaction, that line, I have no division. And just the idea, something that we kind of make fun of these days in the modern military on like what an officer's job is and how much care an officer has over enlisted. And there's things about, inter service rivalry, and some of it's good fashion ribbing, some of it goes too far. But back then, these officers, these men were numbers in the heat of battle, but every death is felt. It's not, that wasn't just Pickett losing, an asset. That was Pickett losing bits and pieces of himself.
Oh yeah, they loved their men, they loved their units. Not all did, but a vast majority did.
Mm-hmm.
I love the line that goes with it, that when Lee's talking to Longstreet, saying, to be a good soldier, you have to love the army, but to be a good commander, you have to be willing to send into the to kill or defeat that thing that you love.
Mm-hmm.
And so it weighs heavy on you. And I think, again, as Mike said earlier, the humanization of the story, they made these men human. The movie's about the human aspect more than just the battle itself.
Absolutely. And it's that aspect, again, that humanizing of the, not in as grand a scale in recent times, had there been a civil war. The English gentleman says, the British Civil War that they refer to is, a long
time ago.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, that was fought with swords and shields and stuff like that. It's completely different. Yeah,
exactly. And a lot of your conflicts during the colonial era aren't necessarily civil wars, even though sometimes civil wars broke out along with bigger fights. It's often, the big players of Spain and France and the UK.
Yeah, the big colonies, basically try to one up each other and competing over, most of them were just lining rich people's pockets more. That's all it was, let's be honest, that covers the majority of wars over the years. But, a lot of that era, the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, French, it really was just, for money, for resources, to own somewhere and make money off it and become more powerful as a result. It was a completely different type of situation. A civil war is something different, but I mean, you could call, I suppose, the battles between Scotland and England wasn't really a civil war because, they very much, although we're now one country, if you like, but you still have that rivalry, even now it's sporting wise and stuff like that, like our football teams played each other a week ago or so, and it was like war. But other than that, we basically have the same government. So it's different now. But at that time they weren't. It wasn't like a civil war. It was that was very much two sides. It just so happened to be they were right next to each other over a very small wall.
Yep, Hadrian's, and it's awe-inspiring. Like I said, because you don't have any recent history of this idea of friends fighting each other, brothers, families torn apart over states, over slavery, over all sorts of interpersonal things at lower levels, let alone the big topics at the government levels, and it's shocking. It really is. You get a little bit of it in the American Revolutionary War, but not to this extent.
Yeah,
and
it's
a lot more
even
hatred
then, it's a little bit different.
Other.
Yeah, because again, you've still got one, force trying to exert its rule on another. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And it ultimately is the fight to manage your own fate. Which is ultimately what most of the conflicts that either England or France or Spain or Britain or anything like that got into was usually that. They've conquered somewhere and the people actually after a while just say, do you know what, we're fed up with you guys and we want to take it back again.
Absolutely.
So
that pretty much wraps it up, guys. This is a great movie to watch.
Yes.
The battle scenes are absolutely accurate as far as showing what it was like to reload while moving, how you have to march in a line, and one of the most devastating aspects of the Civil War, and something that the military struggles for even to this day in some aspects, is when the technology surpasses the tactics, and you field technology that hasn't your tactics haven't adapted to. And in this case, of the Civil War, you're talking more accurate rifling and faster loading rifles, including your early repeaters, especially in pistols. There were some repeating carbines. There, of course, was the Gatling gun out west, but that wasn't that big of a usage. But the colonial era, the Napoleonic, line them up, march them across until you can see the white of their eyes. That became a hell of a lot more deadly because of these rifles that could all of a sudden reach out and touch you from a lot further away.
And we have these things as well. Sorry, on you go.
I was just saying one more thing that drives the tactics people forget is that communications was done through bugle calls, drums, and flags.
Yep.
Thus, for you to command such your larger units, you had to have them within earshot and eye shot.
Yeah.
And that was one of the driving forces of the tactics. It's not like today that you can spread out and you got nowadays almost every individual soldier's got a communication device.
Yes.
In my day, it was every squad had a communication device. And so that's another big driving thing. It's still technology driven, but communications was, well, that's one of the bad things on the battlefield. And we all know that communication is essential to a victory. We shoot, move, and communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of moving, we're going to move on and wrap it up and say thank you to Mike. I know you had to leave early, bud, but we really appreciated you being here. Cam, as always, for helping me hold this down and for letting us get two picks in for the good old US of A before he will select the next war movie we're going to cover.
It's going to be USA as well, to be fair. So,
okay. Do you already know it, Cam?
No.
Okay.
It's going to be something Vietnam based. So, okay. I haven't decided. I'm kind of, there's three that I'm debating between.
All right.
At the moment.
The best way you guys will know what Cam picks is when you follow us on Twitter at LRM_exclusive. Myself, I'm at that Kyle Malone on Twitter. We got a lot of really great things here on the YouTube channel. If you're watching us there, a lot of celebrity interviews. Robert Duvall, who actually plays Lee in the Gods and Generals movie, does a really good job as well. I like Sheen better, but Duvall does a good job. We've got a lot of A-list celebrities and creators in film and comics, all of that, as well as all of our great podcasts include the Daily Cog, our daily show every morning, live on Thursdays, which is kind of cool. The Animeversal reviews, Marvel's covering Loki on Thursdays, as well as Breaking Geek Radio and the Cantina, where you can hear me and my Scottish compatriot speak at length about Star Wars. And of course, thank you very much to Tony Malone for bringing in some expert analysis on this battle and this film. And my dad, thank you. So
thank you all. Nice meeting everybody.
Yep. Cam, anything you need to plug for the site or anything?
No, you can find me at LRM_Cam if you want to get in touch on Twitter.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Keep an eye out for what Cam selects, and we'll talk to you next month. Bye.